Hello and welcome. I am Annette Reeder from thebiblicalnutritionist.com, and today it's about making a delicious bread, and this is a delicious brown bread. If you watched my black bread and you saw how delicious that one is, this one's going to top that by quite a bit. Well, I enjoy serving you God's recipe for excellent health, and today it's about making your own Boston brown bread. It's just delicious. So before we get started, please go ahead and hit like, subscribe, and the bell. And that tells me I'm giving you the content that you desire, because I am here to educate, to inspire, and to encourage you to understand the three recipes, the three ingredients to God's recipe for excellent health. Number one, understand how much God loves you. Number two, how He created your body to heal and to be healthy. And number three, how to be confident in the kitchen. Yes, this is a really good recipe, and I want you to experience it as best as possible. So let's get started. Now this recipe is on page 63 of the Treasures of Healthy Living cookbook, Healthy Treasures cookbook, and you can get this pretty much on all platforms where you buy books. This is on page 63, Boston brown bread. Now let me just go ahead and get the first step going before I share any more about this recipe. And what I'm going to do is, the cookbook says, and I hope you have your cookbook open because I have some white space. When I cook in front of you like this, I'm going to give you other tips that you could add variety to the recipes. So when you get your cookbook, make sure you open it up and follow along. It says to add 1.5 cups of boiling water. Well, this is not boiling water. This is actually apple juice. What I'm going to do is pour this over our 1 cup of raisins. To this, I'm going to add our baking soda. Ooh, that fizzled up. And so what we're going to do is, this is going to totally plump up our raisins. You can use water. If that's all you have, go ahead and use it. But if you have organic apple juice, then I want you to use that instead. Now the reason is because if you use an apple juice, it's not going to pull the sweetness out of the raisins. It's actually going to let them keep their sweetness. When we use water to plump up our raisins, it actually draws the sweetness out of the raisins. And yes, we have a very chewy, nice texture raisin, but we have no flavor. So using an organic apple juice instead works better. Now, let's put this aside and let it do its magic. Now, this is called Boston brown bread. I just have to ask, how many of you in years past were given a loaf of Boston brown bread in a can of coffee? Not with the coffee, but an empty coffee can. Because this recipe actually came from my grandma. They lived their entire life on a farm, and it's a century farm, so it's been recognized as that, and it's incredible. She had 10 kids, and at Christmas, I remember going there. My dad was the oldest. And I remember going there for Christmas, and she would give us the Boston brown bread. She had baked it in a coffee can, you know, about like this and this, and she had taken it out, wrapped it up in a bow, and it was a Christmas gift. And it was delicious. Well, that's why I wanted to include it in this recipe book, because this cookbook is just about a treasure, and it's a treasure for sure. Okay, so that's our first step. So while those raisins plump up, when they are nice and plump, they just taste better in the bread. So anytime you make a cinnamon roll or a raisin bread of any kind, always plump up your raisins first with some boiling either water or apple juice. You could use grape juice too. That would actually make a lot of sense to use grape juice with raisins. Now, while that's doing its magic, we'll go ahead and add the other ingredients. Yes, you could use your Bosch mixer, or you could just use a hand, just stir it up by yourself. So what we're going to start with is 3 tablespoons of butter. And I just have this at room temperature, and it's kind of warm today, so it's very soft. To this, I'm going to add some molasses. And molasses just is a key flavor for this bread. This is a sweet bread. Okay, I'm just going to give you a heads up. This is a sweet bread. This is a dessert. This has got some calories. This has got some sugar. So not sugar, but you know what I mean. So what we have here is a 1/2 cup. To this, we're going to add 2 eggs. And this is pretty much going to give us our liquid plus a teaspoon of vanilla. And this is a recipe that I really recommend the vanilla, and don't alternate with an almond because that's just going to taste really funky. Now, the best thing to mix this up is your Fisky. So we have this. Let me just kind of cream this together. This is almost like a cookie batter or a cake batter. To this, we're going to add some sucanat. Now, you might think, why is my sucanat two different colors? Well, sometimes when I'm combining in my canisters, I'll combine some of the natural and then some of the organic white sucanat. So I'm blending this in, and yes, this is definitely a very sweet bread. I know I said that, but I just want to make sure you realize what I'm saying. So this is just going to make a really nice, delicate, a good bread for tea. If you're going to have tea with someone or just light dessert, I would slice it up into thin slices and just enjoy it. So I've creamed all of that. All right, so the sucanat, it was, make sure I can give you the rest of the ingredients, it was 1.5 cups. You could totally cut back at least a half a cup. But I want you to make it the first time as is, so you get an example of what the flavor is, and then go from there. And even the apple juice is going to add some calories too, so if you did water, you wouldn't have that. To this, we're going to add some cinnamon and some nutmeg and some salt. So the salt is 1 teaspoon, the cinnamon is 2 teaspoons, and the nutmeg is just a half a teaspoon. And you, boy, I can sure smell that really well. Okay, now we're going to add our flour. So this is totally where you can be creative. You could use spelt, einkorn, kamut, emmer, hard white, hard red. And I actually have a mixture of spelt and hard red because that just happened to be what I was milling today. So I'm going to mix this up. So this is 4 cups of flour. And our raisins are plumping up very nicely. All right, so you can see it's blending really well. And this is not a bread because it's a quick bread, so you do not need to knead it. So therefore, I really didn't need the Bosch mixer. It mixes very well by hand. And you'll notice for the most part, these are ingredients that you have on hand. If you are ever without power, you could easily bake this in a sun oven and it would work perfectly fine. Go ahead and put the rest of my flour in and mix this up. So yeah, if you've not looked into a sun oven for power outages, I highly recommend that as well. I have used it in teaching classes, prepping classes. I have traveled a couple different churches and throughout the different states teaching prepping classes. That's like the funnest class ever. I guess because I just enjoy it so much. It's a hobby of mine. Okay, so our raisins, I'm going to go ahead and strain them. And I'm just going to let the liquid go straight into our bread. Just like that. And then I can mix this up once again with my Fisky. So it's going to be a little bit like a cake batter, and that's okay. It's going to totally absorb this juice. And once I get this stirred in real well, then we will add the raisins back in. But I just want to fold the raisins in. I don't want to beat them, okay? So I just want to get this all mixed up. And then I'm going to add in the raisins, and I'm also going to add in 1 cup of chopped nuts. Now, if you're new to cooking, then if the recipe says 1 cup of nuts chopped, then you would measure 1 cup of nuts that are not chopped, then you would chop them, and then you would add it. But if it says 1 cup chopped nuts, then you measure them already chopped. So that's just, you know, a small thing, but it makes a big difference, especially in baked goods. All right, so let's go ahead and fold in our raisins. And then I'm going to use walnuts. You could use pecans if that's your favorite. You could also make the raisins, you could use cranberries instead if you want a different flavor. All right, so we're going to just lightly fold this in. And then I've got 2 pans ready to go, just lightly greased. If you're more comfortable if the pans are greased and floured, that's okay too. We're going to bake this at 350 for 1 hour. Yeah, definitely. It's a quick bread, but not a quick bake. So interesting how that all translates. The the more extensive breads are a quick bake. When you look at the wheat bread and all that we bake for 27 minutes, and then our quick breads we bake for an hour. I don't know who came up with all that terminology. Makes no sense. So, yeah, so anytime we do these recipes and you've got the Healthy Treasures cookbook, just go ahead and pull it out, make notes on the pages. There is a good white space for you to write your own notes, how much you liked it when it's all baked. All right, so we don't have to let this rise. We have no yeast. So I'm gonna pop this right in the oven at 350, bake for 1 hour, and we will have 2 loaves, one for us, one to give away. Well, here we have our Boston brown bread. It is delicious. You can figure that out by the ingredients. And it's unique, it's different, something different to serve on the table, maybe for a Bible study or a prayer meeting or just a ladies get together, or maybe just your family get together. It could be a breakfast, although it's a little bit too much sweetness for breakfast that I would recommend, but it does have the fiber, so we have that going for it. Maybe, but I would definitely recognize that it is more of a dessert, and that way it has its place at the table. I hope you enjoy this recipe, and you could just think about it. Okay, it's a Boston brown bread, so maybe I'll pray for people who live in Boston. Thanks for letting me share this recipe with you. It is always my joy and my honor to share with you God's recipe for excellent health. And that does include being confident in the kitchen, confident with your health, but most importantly, confident in understanding how much God loves you. Thanks for watching.